afternoon, everybody. My name is Chloe Rose. I am the Executive Director of Portfolio Management at Pratia. This is a dedicated clinical research organisation in Europe. And today we're talking about innovative clinical trials leading the way in nicotine research. So why do we need this? As we know, smoking causes a massive risk, but this is not stopping the general population at this point in time. What it has done is create a huge market for RRPs, so these reduced risk products. But of course, before we can start using them, we need to understand what the risk-benefit profiles are of these. And of course, naturally, we need to test them in humans first, whilst maintaining, of course, always the safety of our subjects, but also the integrity of the data that we accumulate at this time. So when you're looking for a clinical research centre, it's very much choosing a needle in a haystack. There is clinical research conducted all over Europe, especially in nicotine research. But what you really need to look at in this instance is the experience of the site, what type of database they have in terms of patient populations, and also what regulations that they have as a site are in place. And the reason I say that is because there are only recommendations at this point in time, no regulations, as you can see by ABPI and EMEA, which offer this already. There are also key challenges when we're looking at running these RRP testing. The population. So typically you think first in human is going to be healthy volunteers who are smoking. But this isn't always the case. In fact, recently we've run some trials in both Bulgaria and Germany in tobacco heating systems, where actually we're looking at cardiovascular patients, we're looking at patients with pulmonary disease, and we're also looking at those with diabetes. So you then need to make sure that not only healthy volunteers, but we have access to a huge different population of these people with different indications. The other thing with this is we need to ensure that these centres can form their own local ethics committee in order to get the actual protocol design that you want approved. So this sometimes can be a very tall order if you're looking at your typical later phase clinical research sites, which is really where you need a specialised site. So how can a clinical research centre improve your product success? For us, the main focus is always around the study team. It's an experienced study team with collective interest. They are already trained. We have our study-specific protocol training and also mock training. The reason for the mock training is to basically see the patient flow, how the procedures are going to work, how you're going to juggle multiple patients in a very short space of time whilst maintaining subject safety, and also, again, always data integrity. The other thing is the clinical research centre equipment. So in these instances, we need smoking hoods. We also need a dedicated smoking area, which needs to be monitored at all times by study personnel. And in sometimes, in this you can see here, we actually have the smoking rooms. This is an example of one of our nicotine studies we ran where the patients were in confinement for 4 days straight, where they would be able to smoke their own cigarettes whilst we were taking urine and blood samples. So without this equipment on site, this would be a very expensive vendor. The other key thing here is you need to make sure that this site is a good communicator. We need to make sure that they're in constant communication with the sponsor, and so that if there are any issues that arise or a protocol design doesn't quite seem right, the investigators are free to speak up and we can adjust this to ensure the success. And lastly, quality and standard operating procedures. Like I mentioned, there are only recommendations at this point in time, so you really need to ensure that there are safety procedures in place and emergency procedures in place, more importantly. As an example, our site in Warsaw is less than 5 minutes away from the nearest hospital in case there is a serious adverse event. Mentioning our site in Warsaw, behind me is MTZ. This is very close to Chopin Airport. In fact, it's about a 17-minute drive, I can say, by taxi. With this, we have a dedicated team. We have numerous investigators, clinical research staff, study nurses, but we also mainly, and this most importantly, have a huge patient database. and this is a mix of healthy volunteers and also patients across various different patient populations. So this means that we have access to 12,000 in the database, but a general population of 5 million based on the fact it's in Warsaw. In addition to this, there have been numerous FDA audits that we have passed at this point in time. Here you can see a nicotine study overview. At this point, there are just under 1,000 patients that have been recruited at MTZ, powered by Pratia, into nicotine studies. And these are a mix of exploratory studies, phase 4 studies, and also PK studies. Here, I just want to highlight the speed at which some of these studies need to be conducted. So for this one, this is a biomarker study where 112 subjects were enrolled in 6 weeks' time. This one was a confinement period of 4 consecutive cohorts across 4 days. So as you can imagine, this is a very organised team. We need to make sure the patients are in place so we can go through this. Next is a nicotine chewing study where the patients, in this case smokers, had a motivation to quit smoking, and they would be put onto either placebo or a nicotine chewing gum. In this one, 220 patients were enrolled in 6 weeks. And lastly, enrolment time of 3 weeks. This is a tobacco heating system as an example of a study design where 40 Caucasian males were enrolled within just 3 weeks. That is everything from me. We have a booth at the back today, and I'm joined by Agnieszka and Marta. So if you have any questions, we'd love to meet with you. We'd love to discuss any upcoming protocols that you might have and give any input. Thank you for your time.